Moriden Athluan.
Working from within, Moriden Stormcrown created distrust, hatred, and discord within the ranks of the mighty vampire army raised by the ancient bloodline of Clan Volkar.
Cursing the name of he who defeated them, these vampire hordes were driven back to the plains of oblivion.
And so we find ourselves thrown together once again, my friend. Almost as if one of us were looking for the other. But why would either of us do that?
To self-improvement and the training of long-ignored talents and abilities.
Even as he trained at the illustrious and fabled Mages College of Winterhold, Moriden still continued to search for a solution to the continuing dragon attacks.
Spending his time, now, searching for answers among the countless tomes of the Arcanum Library, it would not be long before he was again called on to save all of Skyrim. Nay, all of
Is
the
that where we left
the
off?
grasping hands of power mad men.
Once again, the bards only tell you what they believe to be truth. They weren't there. They don't understand. You, though. You, of all people, need to understand. So let me tell you what the bards will not, what they cannot. Because the truth is not what the bards would have you believe. For Evening Star, 4th Era, 201. The initial portions of the tomb were much as I expected, though with a fairly notable number of risen Draugr, 3 or maybe even 4 times more than I would expect. Fortunately, they are no more intelligent in larger numbers than they are in smaller numbers, so by keeping to the deeper shadows and shooting from cover, they were very easy to deal with. When I reached the central chamber, however, I got what might be a partial answer to the question of their numbers. A sarcophagus that has a complex lock system the likes of which I've not encountered before. From the shape of the keyholes, there are a pair of skull-shaped keys somewhere in this tomb. The question is this: are they locking me out, or something else in? Either way, I can't help but find out what is in that tomb and what, if anything, it can grant me in terms of power. Besides, I haven't found the gauntlets yet, so I am likely to need to unlock this sarcophagus anyhow. There were 2 wings branching off from the central room. With nothing to really tell between them, I picked one at random and began to push further into the tomb. As I expected, there were a great number more of the Draugr, but for an hour there seemed nothing special about this portion of the tomb. Indeed, I was about to return back to the central chamber when I saw a room I had somehow missed. Inside, a skull with jeweled eyes sitting on a pedestal. My long experiences these last months have led me to the startling conclusion that this is likely a trap of some kind. I shot the skull from the pedestal, and 3 Draugr, including one who threw fireballs at the former location of that skull immediately, emerged within moments. The fireball thrower was the first to die, and the other 2 that appeared on the levels above and on either side of me seconds later. Still no sign of the gauntlets, but there is still more of the tomb to investigate. The final section of the tomb was waterlogged. I do not understand why the ancient Nords thought that deliberately running a small river through a tomb was a good idea, but it does seem to be something that shows up with some level of frequency. In a section of the bottom floor, the chest I was seeking made itself known to me, and inside, as I expected, I found the gauntlets of the Crusader. Like the other pieces, there is a resonance of some kind, a feel to them, that at one time might have been the power of an daedra, which one, though, I can only guess at. All I can say is that it is not one of them that I have served at any point. Which leaves, somewhere, a second skull key to find. Not much further on, the other skull tempted any who should find it with its very obvious presence. As with the other, I knew this to be a trap, likely the same kind the previous one was. Again, I shot it from its perch and then laced the trio of defenders with more arrows before retrieving the skull and putting it in my pack alongside its mate. Additional to the skull, however, were a pair of weapons of most unusual make. Indeed, if a weapon could be said to be a ghost, that would be these weapons. I am not sure exactly what I've found here, but it is almost certain that Aryan will. A ghostly weapon, no matter how powerful it ends up being, will likely make for a fine display at the museum. Back at the sarcophagus, I realized I had a dilemma. How to open the thing without placing myself in undue danger. I found no way to do this, and so dropped both skulls into their slots and made for cover. What emerged was... I have no words for this creature. It burst forth, floating above the ground, its glowing eyes searching for me intently, and, when it believed it had located me, launched not fire, but balls of lightning at me before calling up a pair of storm Atronachs to assist it in its hunt. Though the ball of blue death came close to hitting me, it was enough off that I was able to avoid any serious damage. Over the next few minutes, using the debris in the room, I was able to put several arrows into the creature and its pets. When it finally went down, I found a set of armor of curious make, along with a mask that had on its inside a single word: Otar. I do not know the meaning of this word. Another thing that perhaps Aryan will be able to assist with. With the minor mystery solved, and another one begun, I made my way out of the tomb. Also was my intention. The passage beyond the sarcophagus, which had previously been blocked, was open now, I noticed. After retrieving the 2 skull keys, more displays for the museum, I made my way into the new passage where a large chest lay unopened. When I opened it, a large, white-faceted gem met my eyes. Huge. None of the gems I've been collecting, buying, or selling have the white of this one, though it does remind me somewhat of abalone. Slowly, I put hand to it, and the very instant I touched it, I was given a forceful reminder of just how much attention the daedric lords were paying to me. This gem was a beacon. Meridia's beacon. Her voice slammed into my head, imperious and demanding. She has given me orders to go to her temple at Mount Kilcreath, not far from Solitude, where I will assist her in the cleansing of her temple. As abruptly as her voice had assaulted my mind, it was gone. Meridia is the greatest example of how being wholly dedicated to the light can have results as bad or worse than being wholly dedicated to the dark. While she hates all things undead, which would have included me until recently, she is also absolutely against any form of imperfection. If it is not pure, she will try to make it so, and her interference with some animals and creatures on Mundus are the stuff of nightmare and legend. There is no way I can live up to that level of perfection. But she is also known to show mercy of a kind on men and mer, recognizing this fact. If I refuse, she will find another to do this work, but she will then likely send that same other to hunt me down and purify me. Which means, really, that I have no choice. I passed back through the outskirts of Markarth and delivered the news of the sudden and tragic end of all of the Forsworn who had taken over Kolskega Mine, to absolutely maddening applause from the miners. They were already preparing to leave to resume their operations before I even finished collecting a small cash reward for my efforts, and really, who can blame them? Though I have no place to call home, outside the museum, I suppose, even I can understand the draw and excitement of going back to a place you call your own. I turned to the east, heading along the riverside road towards Granite Hill and Whiterun, though one eye was on the northern shores and rises, as I had been told that the final piece of the Crusaders' armor, the mace, might be located in a fort of some kind on the heights. It fit the clues I had, and so, with no better options for the moment, that was my plan. Right up until that eye to the north spotted a glacial dragon swooping down off the mountains near Karthspire. This was a true test of my abilities. I was mortal as I had not been in some time. There were no other foes to distract the beast, and on top of it all, there was nowhere to really hide. Apart from a moment of instant regret that I had sent the shield given me by Periite back to the museum already, the fight was a decent one, and the ending on the slopes of Karthspire was suitably satisfying. I have to imagine that Alduin is more than a little annoyed with me. What with me killing all of the minions it brought back to life after it spent all that time resurrecting them. My heart bleeds for it. Speaking of bleeding, the bandits occupying Fort Sunguard, sitting firmly atop of the mountain ridge over the main road east and west in the Reach, did quite a bit of this. I gave them an opportunity to allow me to enter peacefully, take the one item I sought, and depart with no additional casualties, but they chose the route of folly. You'll note I said additional casualties. My offer was attached to a bone arrow that I placed in the chest of one of their sentries, along with my estimate of about 150 yards range between him and where I shot him. I intended it to be an indication that I could, with little effort, simply kill them all, and wanted a more peaceful solution. I'm not sure they ever read the note, honestly, because they came out of the fort, single file, almost as soon as the first one dropped. I shrugged, and gave them the death that they apparently desired. It was only as I was strolling up to the main gate of the fort, completely and totally unharmed, and really only breathing slightly hard because of all the arrows I had to shoot, that I realized the mistake I had made in my assumptions. These were not bandits, but Forsworn. This explains much, including the completely irrational need to get themselves killed in a particularly stupid fashion. Knowing what I know of Paarthurnax, though, how could I expect less than unthinking fanaticism from his followers? I strode over the bodies, and in a small room, accessible from a remote portion of the fort that wasn't even occupied, I located the chest containing the mace. The collection is now complete, I think, though I'm not calling this done until they are all in solitude and attached to a wall. Aryen will love it. The next prospect on Aryen's list was to be found in Whiterun. I had never heard the name before, but the way that Aryan had written it on the list gave me the impression that this recruit might be something of a cut above the others I had found so far. After all, rarely does one simply hand out the title Professor. Marasi was not what I'd expected, and I wonder if that title is something of a joke between them. As it turns out, the two have known each other for quite some time, though they haven't worked directly together in over 3 decades. As Marasi puts it, time flies when you're a mer. I can relate. His sense of humor, however, is every bit as abysmal as the rest of them so far. Despite this, the call from his old friend was too much to resist, and Professor Marasi will be joining us in solitude, which left me, now, with a small problem. Once I had set off all the items I'd been gathering the last day or two, I went to Bree's home. My house, here in Whiterun. Notice I do not call it a home. There is life in a home. And here, there was only death and memories. Lydia and I had spent a number of hours here, learning of each other. Serana had once spent a pleasant evening here with me as well. The first was dead, and the other could not, if she wanted to maintain her position, speak with me again unless I turned my back on mortality yet again. I stayed in the Bannered Mare instead. Any ghosts I might find can at least be chased away by the constant drunken bawling they call singing here. 5 Evening Star, 4th Era, 201. The dragon I killed yesterday was, for some reason, strong on my mind last night as I tried to sleep. It was a stark reminder that there is a major problem to be dealt with. Alduin. I faced it once, and though I will not call it a victory, drove it off. Paarthurnax was insistent that I need to finish the beast off completely, and given that it is supposed to be the creature that will end the world eventually, I have to admit it is likely something I should deal with sooner or later. And here I am, in Whiterun, where the next step towards that end is most likely located. The plan is insane. Jarl Balgruuf would have to be as mad as old Emperor Pelagius to even consider it. On the other hand, this is almost exactly the kind of thing that Dragonsreach was built to do, to lure in and capture a dragon, to put me in a position to interrogate one and learn where Alduin is hiding, and what I can do to follow it and destroy it. Even with that reasoning, it sounds insane. If I can't convince Balgruuf, however, then I have no idea what other path forward there might be. It's enough to drive a mer to drink. And if I hadn't already sworn off the stuff thanks to Sanguine, I might have had one before I started up the walk to Dragonsreach. The Jarl was still at the war table, though to what end, I could not say. The war with both the Stormcloaks and the vampires was over, the 2 victories on his side, and his own legend as a stalwart and dependable leader and warrior firmly established. Granted, it would not be a story of my scale, but he would be a very well-remembered name in the next era, I thought. When I heard, however, what Proventus was speaking to him of, I paused. The Jarl's youngest child, Nelkir, was acting oddly, it seemed, and worse, Balgruuf brushed away the concern as though it were nothing at all, and that is not like the man I have come to know. Instead of approaching the Jarl, I turned instead to speak to Proventus and see if I could learn more of the situation and, more importantly, why Balgruuf would be ignoring it. Of course it could be just nothing, but I could feel something in the air, a presence. One that might explain it, if I was right. And I hoped that I was not. I must give some admiration to Preventus, as he refused to say a word about the situation to me, despite knowing that I would never harm Balgruuf or his family. I don't have much of a care about anyone in this world, but the Jarl, him I have a genuine respect for. Preventus, however, wouldn't hear of it, and shut me out, which left me only a single alternative to investigate. If it were true, then word would get out to the people. They, like myself, have a genuine care about their ruler. If anyone knows of this, it would be Hulda. I spent the time walking back down to the mare, hoping I was wrong, that all was fine, and Preventus was just overworried. I was not wrong. And when I spoke directly to the Jarl as his Thane and, I hope, friend, his face fell before he admitted that he had noticed it as well. Nelkir had always been quieter than his siblings, but the last few weeks, it has been far worse. Bad enough that the boy refuses to speak a word to his father at all. I've volunteered to look into it. And while I think I know what is happening here, I kept it to myself. I would not want to have the boy's father think that they might be under the influence of Mafala. It was as I feared. Speaking to Nelkir, a boy of perhaps 8 or 9, I could have been speaking to someone who had been spending their entire 4-decade life in the backstabbing domain of politics. He was far more jaded, far more aware than he should have been. He knew things about his father that he shouldn't have known, especially as it pertained to the war, the Thalmor, and his own irregular parentage. At first he maintained he'd learned it all just by listening in darkened corners, overlooked and unnoticed. I almost believed him, might have, even, if not for Azura's gift. I took a gamble and asked if a lady had been whispering secrets to him. His face was shocked for a moment before he quickly took on the same carefully crafted, indifferent look he had had the entire conversation. Then, believing I must already know to have asked at all, he admitted it. In a basement door, here, in Dragonsreach, there was a keyhole he had been listening at, and that was where Mafala was working her will on the boy. Not that he called her that. To Nelkir, she was just the Whispering Lady. But it's enough. I have enough to take action. Grown adults have little business making deals with daedric lords, even myself, despite what I have been all but forced to. But children, they should never feel this kind of influence so strongly and so young. I almost missed the door. It was buried so deep in the basement. Were it not for some less than obvious signs that a door had been opened recently and been made to look as if it had not, I might have missed it. The outer door was nothing special, not even locked. The one beyond, however, just being in its proximity was almost painful. Once I was kneeling by it, though, no room was left for doubt. Mafala, Lady of Secrets, spoke to me just as she had Nelkir. We spoke for only a few moments, mostly her lamenting that the child had no agency, no ability to create the chaos she prefers. If he had, well, the court here was rife with secrets. Knowledge is always a key to power, and applied knowledge could create many opportunities indeed. Not for a child, however. For someone like me, though. Mafala saw the opportunity and offered a trade. I do a small favor for her, and she releases her hold on Nelkir. It wasn't much of a choice, really. I agreed. The favor was simply to get this door open and retrieve what she called a piece of her power, to unleash it into the world once more. May whatever beings of power that exist in the world and care about such things forgive me. But I would rather do this thing than allow the child to be so firmly under her influence. As for me, what was the touch of one more daedric lord when I already had so many? Mafala had left no room for doubt. The information I needed was already in Nelkir's possession, which meant meeting with the child one more time. I presented myself to him and asked, trying to maintain the air of two people who shared a secret that none other knew, trying to treat him as an equal for just this moment, about the key to that door. His attitude was somewhere between insulted that I would think he might not know, and grateful that somebody recognized his importance. There are two people who can get me that key. The first is Balgruuf himself, which implies the man knows what is behind that door. The second is Farengar, the wizard that I have never cared for. Nelkir even suggested that nobody would miss Farengar if he were to go missing. I need to get that boy out from under Mafala's influence quickly. I considered the two options. I was leaning towards talking to Balgruuf, but if he denies me, I already know that I would steal the key and do it anyhow. In some cases that might not be a problem, except that soon I'm going to ask him to do something insane, and I don't want him to have reason of any kind to suspect that I might have betrayed him at some level. Which means that as soon as Farengar is alone, he will suddenly misplace a key. And if, perhaps, he gets in a small amount of trouble over that, well, I can't say he hasn't earned that much, at least. The key wasn't as hard to obtain from Farengar as I had thought. He was, as usual, highly distracted by his research into whatever topic it was that had taken his fancy this week. He barely noticed I even entered the room, let alone when I took the key from his pocket. Leaving with as little fanfare as I had arrived with, I went back to the door and unlocked it. The room beyond had only 4 items in it: a table, a statue of Mafala, a letter that warned in the strongest possible words to leave the final item where it lay, gathering dust for all of eternity, lest it get loose and destroy all of civilization, and a blade made of darkest ebony, the faintest traces of dried blood still on the uncleaned blade. The ebony blade. She had said it was a piece of her power, and in this she did not lie. Indeed, this weapon has even more of a legend behind it than Lord Baal's mace. What Boethia had bade me do but once, this blade would require of me 1,000 times over: the death of those who trust me, the murder of those who are closest to me. Only with those killings would the blade be restored to its original, well, I hesitate to call it glory, but it will have to suffice here. Too bad for Mafala's plan that I have none who are close to me. Her blade will remain powerless, and behind the most powerful magical field I can convince Aryan to make in the museum. I tucked the blade as deeply into my pack as I could, hiding any trace of it. I closed the door behind me, relocking it. I even went back and put the key back into Farengar's pocket. If they ever choose to make sure the blade is still there, then how it vanished will remain a mystery. That all done, I went back to Balgruuf and told him that I had spoken with Nelkir and taken care of what had been bothering him lately. When I was asked, I told him, somewhat truthfully, that I was sworn to secrecy on the matter. Child or not, if I can't keep my word, how could Balgruuf trust me, after all? He wasn't happy about that, but he accepted it. He also all but forgot it when I asked for his help trapping a dragon in the palace. All of it came out. Alduin's return, our battle on the top of the throat, how and why the dragons were returning. His face seemed to get more and more pale with each pronouncement, especially when Alduin was mentioned. He was all but certain, as many will be when this news gets out, that its return was the harbinger of the end times. I stopped talking at that point and gave him a very direct look. If these are the end times, then I intend to go out fighting. What about you? He committed to helping with the laugh. The trap will be inspected and repaired as needed. The men will be informed. The people of Whiterun will be warned. As for me, I need to find a way to summon a dragon here to the palace. My experience with this is limited. While I can summon Durnavir simply by shouting his name, no other dragon names are known to me. That leaves two places I can look into the matter. Neither is appealing. Paarthurnax or the Blades. Why do I feel like this is going to go very, very wrong? The Blades might be useful in many ways, but dragon knowledge, even as much as Esbern has, is not their strength anymore. If you want to catch a dove, then you need the knowledge only another dove can give, and that means Paarthurnax. With that thought firmly in mind, I left Whiterun immediately, heading for Ivarstead. Along the way, however, a most curious thing happened. It was not the giant that attacked me on the road, nor the strange wood elf nearby who got involved in the fight, on the against side, I'm afraid, both of whom are now dead. No, it was the madwoman that the wood elf had with him. When the fighting was over, she came straight up to me and spouted some nonsense before she ran off into the wilds. Normally, I'd write them off as something, well, something a mad person might say. Considering, however, that the plan I had just set in motion is completely mad as well, I thought on those phrases of hers, and I think there might be more sense in them than I'd believed. The master is gone, but Dervinin will find him. Dervinin should not have gone. Vacation is where the head is. That is what Dervinin told us about our master. He's cozy in his solitude. The name is somewhat familiar. Not someone I've spoken to, I think, but someone I have heard of. I tried to puzzle out the meaning, but was left only more confused. I continued on my journey, and though I am confused by the encounter, I will not forget it. I know it. This means something. I reached High Hrothgar some hours after sunset. The wind seemed stronger today than it had the previous times I had traveled this path, and I hoped that this was not to be taken as an omen. I spoke not a word to the greybeards on my return, though we exchanged nods as I passed. What will happen soon will be between me and the ancient dove, and I would not get the greybeards involved. Angir's reaction the last time I asked about something that touched on possibly hurting a dove tells me how he will react to the idea of trying to capture one. And so I kept to myself this night. I will travel the cold path to the summit tomorrow, and treat with Paarthurnax once again. 6 Evening Star, 4th Era, 201. I was not the only one pondering on how our insane plan to capture a dove might work. While I had been finishing other business after the fight with Alduin, Paarthurnax had been contemplating how to lure one of Alduin's followers into that trap. With my return, and my confirmation that we would be able to use Dragonsreach for this purpose once more, the old dove nodded in a way that seemed to be both resigned and confident. It knew which dove to target, an old ally of Alduin's called Odaving. Initially, I was not impressed. Knowing the name of the dove we intended to capture was not, I thought, helpful. It was then that Paarthurnax confirmed to me something I had suspected, really had all but been told, but did not understand. All dove names are Thuum, are shouts. Just as I can summon up Durnavir by shouting his name, I can call out to any dove whose name I know and understand. There is a branch of belief that states that if you know the true name of a being, you can control it. This is not quite the case here, but me, a Dovahkiin, shouting the name of a dove will almost certainly be taken as a challenge, and Odahviing, Snow Hunter Wing, is known to be brash and reckless among the dove. If I call it, it will come. I have the trap. I have the bait. Now all I have to do is bring the two together and do what has only been done once before. That thought resonated in my head traveling back towards Whiterun. What I was seeking to do had only been accomplished once. The capture of a dragon had taken the combined and concerted efforts of a kingdom to accomplish. Now, I was going to try it on my own, with the assistance of a modest amount of local forces from one hold, albeit a powerful and important one. If we failed, the world would likely end, devoured by Alduin and his endless, bottomless hunger. Not all at once, not immediately, but piece by piece over centuries. In the meantime, it would be subjugated and divided up among the dove who survived me or whom Alduin brought back. Pain, suffering, and torture would be the future. If we didn't try, the same. So it came down to what I told Balgruuf yesterday. I intend to go out fighting. At least there is a chance, I tell myself. The trap has worked. Once. If I were able to call upon a daedric lord to assist me now, only one would come to mind. This plan had to have come straight from Sheogorath's own skull. I found the Jarl supervising the testing of the old trap, and much to the surprise of everyone there, it appeared to work flawlessly. Farengar went on at length about how the mechanism was somehow reinforced with a magic he was not familiar with, babbling on about resonances, cascades, and other such magical nonsense. But regardless of the how of it, the device worked as it was intended to, or at least so far as we can tell. It's not like any dragons have been caught in it since the first, the only. I spoke briefly with the Jarl and Farengar, and believing we have all the pieces we need, plus the underlying knowledge that word would get out about this quickly, and the longer we waited, the more nervous and panicked the citizenry might become, we made the decision. Tomorrow, just after dawn, I will call out my challenge to Odahviing. I do not pray to the gods, but if I did, then tonight would be the time I would have sent them my most devout wishes.